listeners, it's Jana. Welcome back to Grief Out Loud. It's somehow shocking that this is the last episode of 2025. Grief loves to warp time. It makes a day feel like a month and a month feel like a moment. But to me at least, this year has felt extra time warpy. Maybe it's the roller coaster news cycles, the weight of multiple collective tragedies, or just this growing sense that some of the things we once thought were foundational aren't as solid as we believed. In many ways, that's exactly what happens when grief barges into our lives and takes up residence. The warping and passing of time is part of what we are talking about in this episode. But before we get to that, I want to say thank you. I know I say it at the end of every episode, but be honest, if you're like me, you hit stop play as soon as the outro music starts. So I want to just say thank you for being out there, for listening to the show, for emailing me, and for sharing episodes with others in your world. And thank you for making space for me to talk about my grief after my dog Captain died last December. It's wild how quickly and slowly a year can pass. I knew I wanted to talk with today's guest, Mackenzie Galloway-Cole, the moment I came across her Instagram account, Dead Wife Club. But it took me a while to work up the courage to send her a message. Once I did, I knew this conversation was meant to be the last one we put out in 2025. And that's because Mackenzie gets the uniquely brutal nature of New Year's, the sneaky grief holiday. There's something exquisitely painful about having to switch from saying, my person died this year, to my person died last year. About the accumulation of time without them becoming that much more concrete. And about moving into a new year that your person will never be a part of, at least not in their physical form. Mackenzie knows all this too well, as the transition from 2025 to 2026 will mark the start of the third calendar year of moving through the world without her wife Megan, who died suddenly in November of 2023. Mackenzie shares the love story that brought her and Megan together in New York City and what made their marriage such a deep partnership. We also talk about the shock and isolation of young partner loss, the added layers that come with being a young gay widow, and the painful ways that systems like hospitals and funeral homes can miss, or sometimes even erase, queer relationships. As always, this conversation is honest, tender, and rooted in lots of dark grief humor. And I'm really grateful Mackenzie is here to share Megan with us. Okay, here's our conversation. Mackenzie, I'm so looking forward to our time together today. Thank you for being part of Grief Out Loud.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is just a treat to get to talk about all this, which sounds weird to say, but it is.
I think our listeners get that on some level. Can you talk a little bit about your love story with Megan, your wife?
Yeah, speaking of things I love to talk about, so I met my wife Megan when we were in our kind of early 20s, both living in New York. It feels like a very New York story too, but also one of like a bygone age because we didn't meet online, it was in person. I was going out one night with a friend who invited her friend, who that friend invited people she knew, and through that web of people that all ended up going to a bar one night, it was all people that kind of lived locally in my neighborhood where I had been living, and one of those people, kind of on the further end of the connections, was Megan. And the first night we met, she had actually came because she had gone on a couple dates with my friend's friend. So the night that I met her, in my mind, I was like, oh, good for this girl because that's dating her because this girl that I just met is awesome, and didn't think much of it. Turns out on Megan's side, she would then go on to tell, was that first night we met, she was obsessed with me, which I was oblivious to. I should have not been because I think the two of us just like sat at the end of a table at the bar talking for hours and like ignoring everyone else. But that was it. We kind of came to the end of the night, and Me being me, I said, "Oh, we live near each other. Let's exchange numbers. Let's be friends." So literally the first text I ever sent her was me texting her number saying, "This is Mac. Like, let's be friends. Let's be local neighbor friends." And went off our merry way. I didn't think much of it. And Megan on her end knew literally that night. She was said, "I don't know what I want from this woman, me, but I want her in my life." And at that point, she also like didn't know if I was gay. She knew nothing, which it was kind of obvious at the time. Like I had a lot. It was pretty obvious I was. So, but you know, she didn't know for sure. And so a couple weeks go by. We lived, it turned out, 5 blocks apart from each other, which is a miracle in New York. And she had been like hoping to run into me, trying to play it cool, trying to play it cool, had it. And then eventually, a couple weeks later, she sees me on the train. We're both going into Manhattan, me for my workday. She was heading in for her workday. She sees me hunched over reading a book on the train, and she's like, "This is the chance I've been waiting for." And she walks over and taps me on the shoulder, and I go, "Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you." And we catch up, and in my mind, again, oblivious, I'm like, "Oh my God, that was so nice. She's so nice." And the moment I step off the train platform to go on to work, I get a ding on my phone, and it's a message from her saying, "Hey, do you want to go get a drink?" And at that point, I also was like, "Is this a date? I don't know." It's this fun, queer life thing of, is it a date? Does she just want to be friends? I don't know. She's really cool, so whatever it is great. We figured out on that first date that it was in fact a date, which was great to figure out quickly. And literally from there on, we were really attached to the hip and barely spent time apart for the rest of our relationship and into our marriage. I think Megan would say it was love at first sight. I think I always said, "Well, I didn't know you were available." So in my mind, it was love at first sight once I knew it could be mine. From that first date, my friends all knew something was different because when they asked me how the date went or the maybe date went, I said it was fine. And I'm a talker, and the fact that they were like, that's all you're gonna say," I was like, "Yeah, it was really good." They were like, "Oh, she's nervous and she's scared. This is big."
Yeah. So once that green light was on in terms of Megan's available, sounds like it was also pretty love at first sight for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that gives us a pretty good window into, well, I feel like I just listened to like a scene from a rom-com, which also feels very Manhattan-y.
Yeah.
And I feel like it gives us a good little window into your relationship right from the start. But what else would you add about like what it was like being married to Megan?
She was a force. She had such a dynamic personality. She's one of those people that you could not know she was in a room, both in personality, in like she also was a D1 college basketball player, so she was like 6'3", so she just had this presence and this about her. And then you add in that aura and personality. She had like the big booming laugh. She was always just so external and meeting people and talking and cracking jokes, giving out big, big, giant hugs. And to know her was to love her is very much kind of, I've heard that said about people, and that very much was Megan. So, but in terms of our actual like relationship, it's kind of one that maybe didn't make sense at first, but once you got to know us, it made total sense. Like I said, she was the jock. She was like the cool kid, right? I was the nerd. I was the theater kid. Again, D1 college basketball player. And then she, when we met, was just starting law school. I was like tiny liberal arts college nerd. I did high school quiz bowl. I had been working on Broadway on like back end management side. So it was a very High School Musical, trying Gabriella, the basketball player and the theater kid, nerd. So, like I said, it might not have made sense on paper, but it actually was the exact right fit because while she was the jock, I grew up loving basketball, but I was lived in this artistic theatery world where I didn't have anyone to enjoy that with. And she actually really loved like the arts and always said I guess she had always wanted more people to like take her to things like theater. She loved Glee. Like we had each other's interests. They just were kind of inverted of what was our big primary thing versus what was the thing that no, we didn't have people around us to do with. it was just always fun. And I never knew kind of personality wise who I would end up with. And when I met her, it made total sense. Like we matched each other's energy. But we also took care of each other when the other needed something. We both just kind of were yes people and loved to experience everything we could and everything in New York. We had a problem saying no to anything. But at the end of the day, we also just wanted to spend time with each other. We would do 10-hour road trips and never turn on the music because we would just talk to each other for 10 hours straight. Even after we were married and lived together and living through COVID, like, what more is there to talk about? We somehow would. Um, yeah, so a lot of laughs, a lot of love.
Megan died suddenly at the end of November 2023, just over 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And what feels important in this moment to share about the day that she died?
Yeah, I mean, it's worst day of my life. We'll start there. But it is something that I talk about, even though it's hard, because it is something that was so shocking and unexpected. And I think for my age, being a widow and going through what I have is a niche, and I'm really glad that I don't know people who have gone through this, or I don't know as many people who have gone through this. But yeah, we were having a perfectly normal day, just as we always did. We were at home and it was just the two of us. And like I said, we were always talking and just laughing. We were in the middle of a conversation and she went unconscious. From that moment on, I was by her side through every moment, and which resulted in by that evening, she died while we were in the hospital. And it turns out it was from she'd experienced a sudden cardiac arrest or sudden cardiac event and did everything right, acted quickly. You don't hear a lot about 28-year-olds just dropping dead, especially ones with no previous health issues, no family history, no genetic things. But it happens, and unfortunately, I've learned that it happens to people more people than just the person I love most in this world. I say it's important for me to talk about this because it's such an isolating experience. One, to just go through the death process of a loved one in that way, but two, to have it be such a this is not supposed to happen. People don't just drop dead, and they do. That I've connected with some other people that this has happened to. I've only been able to build those connections through sharing my own story. And it's been so helpful and healing to have people who get it. And I think in grief, we talk a lot about that of finding people that get it. This is such a specific experience that if anyone is out there that like has experienced it and feels like they're the only one, I talk about it to hopefully find that person and be like, you're not the only one. And it's as bad as you feel, but you're not alone and you don't have some curse on you that you're the only person that, had to go through this in the world. So yeah,
Is that how it felt to you early on? Like somehow there was a curse on you or that?
I would say less of, I didn't feel like I had a curse, but it certainly did feel like a why and how. And I did feel like the only person this has ever, obviously, it didn't happen to me, but as much as it happened to her, but my experience of having to go through this, I'm the only person I knew who was a widow at 28. Um, she was the only person I knew who at also 28 just died from unknown reasons. And, I think you hear a lot about young death and you have answers, right? There's a car crash. They were fighting a lifelong illness. There was, mental health issues or other issues. Like there's, a reason. And the reason is terrible, but to also be dealing with the unknown on top of the shock and the trauma of that young death is just another like really fun layer to be navigating at a time when your brain does not work, to also be having to teach your brain to be okay, not okay, but to be able to wrap your brain around this unknown. is near impossible.
Well, and it makes me think about there's your own personal experience of Megan just goes unconscious and dies hours later, and you don't know why. And I imagine it took a while to get any sort of like medical answer. But
Hmm.
in those first few hours and days of having to share the news with friends and family, and the first question often being, what happened?
Of course. It's something I've become really acutely aware of now. There's so many things that you understand and are aware of more after grief, right? But it is something I'm so aware of is anytime someone dies young, the first question someone asks is, well, how did they die? Which I think it's just interesting from a like humanity perspective of, well, why does that matter? Like, are you gonna does the level of sadness you're going to have like change based on that? Like, what is the purpose of that question? But I mean, obviously, it was asked a lot, and for me, it was something I was very open and talked about because I wanted to tell her story authentically, and I feel like that was a choice I made when this is such I feel like a 21st century problem. Like when I wrote the social media death post, like that's the thing we have to worry about. It's not just writing an obituary. It's like I got to announce on my Instagram that she's dead, but even with that, like I I wrote about it being sudden and unexpected. And the thing, and I don't think on that first post I said what it was because it was still such a unknown, but the thing that was really important for me to share in that I remember saying, in her death, just as in our marriage, I was by her side the entire time. Because I said, that was important for me to say. And then, a little bit more space from it, writing obituaries, we said what it was from of a sudden cardiac event, but there's a lot of questioning and a lot of people don't know how to process. And I'm like, same. I'm right there with you. Unfortunately, I just saw more of it.
And something so important about the fact that you were able to be by her side for every moment of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was something I say all the time, it is the worst thing I've ever been through, but I am so grateful that I was there. I think my grief process, there would have been other layers that I didn't have to navigate if I had not been there. There would have been a lot of different what ifs if she had been alone, if she had been at work, if she had been out in public. There are a couple fewer what ifs because I was there the entire time. And I'm able to speak to how quickly I called, how quickly, the fire department showed up, how quickly everything moved. So that's an important part of the story is that I was there.
Seems like it helps to not have to wrangle with the what ifs of preventability because you were there.
100%. There's still so many what ifs, right? Of did I miss something? No. One of the nice things about Megan is she wasn't secretive and she could not hide her emotions or feelings. Like she was such an open book. So those moments where you go, well, was she suffering and she didn't tell me? I very quickly can shush that brain down and say, no, absolutely not. When she had a cold, she was pathetic. Like I would have known if she was struggling because she would have been such a sad little puppy, right? Like, no, there's a lot of those what ifs I can say no to, which when you're navigating such an unknown, truly freak death, I take a lot of peace in those couple what ifs I don't have to worry about.
They matter. They matter a lot.
Yeah, it helps me listen. Those are the ones that help me sleep at night occasionally with what little sleep I get.
Yeah, when you are sleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, going back to this idea, like you were with Megan by her side, it seems like you two were at each other's sides for most of your relationship. And how would you describe those first kind of like hours and days and weeks without Megan physically by your side?
Yeah. I mean, I was dealing with a lot. There's grief, there's trauma, there's shock, there's all of them at the same time. So those early days, it's near impossible to navigate which is which, and the cocktail of all of them together just knocked me out. And um, I'm so grateful for my family and my community who helped me just exist and truly survive. But specifically in that time of being without Megan, I felt my brain rewiring. And that rewiring it took a long time and it still is happening because you realize, especially when losing a partner or a spouse, how many of the smallest moments of your day, even if they are not next to you, they're part of. Um, the moments of needing to turn to her to ask her a question, to call her, to consider her, of, it's something as silly back to 21st century problems, like seeing a funny meme on Instagram and having the urge to send and going, they're dead. Can I still send it technically? Sure, but they're dead. And that even in the hardest moments, you realize too that for me, the one person that I wanted in the hardest moments of my life, that I wanted to go to for comfort, I wanted to go to for an opinion, I wanted to go to for help, was the person who was dead and the person that I was having to make these decisions about. That's just a spiral of the brain that it feels kind of like little fuses breaking constantly. And it feels like having to, in those early days, I had to constantly retell myself she's dead because the first few times you go through that cycle and you tell your brain you can't do that. The reason that you are trying to pick out and plan, you know, an urn is because, and you want to ask for advice for someone, that's the person that you're having to buy this for. Like, it doesn't stick. Your brain is so, or at least my brain, it was so blubbery that it would not keep that information. So it was a every moment a reminder and having to reshare that with myself. Yeah, that is, I think there's a lot of that for all types of loss, but especially like partner spouse loss, that is your go-to, that is your person that every single moment of your day looks different now. It takes a long time, and I still have moments.
What's a recent moment where you went to try to plug the plug back in?
Oh yeah, I still try to text her or call her all the time. Um, that's the go-to. We had one of our kind of routines was, so like I said, she at the beginning of our relationship, she had started law school. By the time she died, she was working and was an attorney. Um, but she did take a lunch for her mental health. She would try to get out of the office and go and sit in a park or go walk, or and she would always call me because I normally had no meetings around my lunchtime. So every lunchtime we would have a quick call, check in, talk. And then she would also always call me because I worked remotely, she worked in person. She would always call me when she was heading out the door to come home. So there have been moments where if something happens in the morning, my brain still occasionally thinks like, oh my God, you got to tell her that at lunch. And then you go, oh, well, I look around my house and see all the little kind of memorials to her, and I'm like, oh, right. Nope, can't call her and do that. Yeah, it's in those little moments, I think, because they're the big moments that you're sad they're not there for. You're so aware that they're not there for those moments. It's those tiny life moments that I think are easier to forget momentarily. Because you were like, oh, there was just this silly thing that happened. Let me tell her. Oh, right. Versus, yeah, I know she's not going to be at Christmas. This is a big, that's a big thing. I'm very aware of it. Um, the tiny moments catch me off guard.
I mean, if we think about grief as a learning, You know, if you're in
Yes.
class for something, the syllabus tells you like this paper's due on this date and this project's due on this date. And those feel like those dates that are on the calendar, like a
Mhm.
holiday or a birthday or an anniversary date. And then there's just the things that pop up. You're like, oh, I got to run to, well, we don't go to the library anymore. But back in the day, we used to like run to the library. The library's closed. Or, you know, there's these little things that catch us in our learning. And it seems like that's what you're describing of those really intimate, personal day to day times.
Yeah.
You've talked about this a smidge already, but you're at this kind of unique intersection of being a widow,
Hmm.
being a very young widow, and then being a young gay widow. And I wonder what it's been like for you to be in this much smaller community of people
Mm.
who are grieving in the bigger scope of grief.
Yeah. That's a really good question because, like you said, each of those each of those groups just gets smaller and smaller, which hey, I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that others have, it's not a big group that have this experience, but it is noticeable. I think for me, I was really fortunate that pretty early in my grieving process, I knew I needed to find community. So the first thing that I found early in my grief process around that was through an organization called the Dinner Party that does in person but also virtual peer-led grief groups. And uh, it's specifically, I don't I don't remember the exact ages, but it's basically for younger people. I think it's like 20 something to 45 or so. So that's the umbrella of it. And then within that, there are groups you can join that are specifically tailored to different themes or identities. When I started looking, a table, they call it, was open and about to start for partner loss. I had already started to look into some like widow groups or partner loss groups, and I would search for young widows, and what would come up would be like young widow support group 65 and under, which yes, that is still young for your spouse to die. However, I knew I that was not close enough to what I was experiencing that to be what I was looking for. So when I found, okay, this is an organization that already is my peer group in age, um, and then I found the partnerless group, and I signed up and started. But even within that group of, I think there were like 12 of us kind of to start, I was the only one who was gay, um, which I wouldn't say in that group was noticeable how I was treated or my experience, but it is just another one of those moments of, oh, right, this is another layer of my experience that is isolating and niche. There were also just things that I went through during the post death process and death admin that were different for me than most people who are not navigating the dynamics of a queer marriage. One of the things that I laugh about because again, I think people at least that grieve and are kind of dark humored a little bit like me will get this. That grief table, we'd been meeting for I don't know, 6, 8 months at this point, and I had to miss a couple because I was traveling over the summer. And then the first one I got came back to online. The woman who was had been running it, she was like, Mackenzie, oh my gosh, you're back. I'm so excited. We have another. I mean, excited's not the word, but there's another girl, and she also lost a wife. Like she was so excited to tell me that like we got another one. You're not the only one. And which is just. And then she was like, yeah. But my reaction was, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Is she here this week? Is she going to be here next week? When can I talk to her? And sure enough, then the next one I think she came to, and we immediately like in the chat to the side was like, "What's your number?" We started texting, and we're like going back and forth. Isolating, but then also when you do find that niche within a niche, there's that immediate connection. I've likened being a young widow and a young gay widow to actually the experience of just being a gay person and the stereotype joke of all of your friends being like, oh, you should date. I know one other gay person. You guys should date. You'll totally get along. This assumption that like these two gay people you randomly know will be friends or would want to date. It's the same thing with people I know who know another young widow or who know another
Mm.
young gay widow. They're like, oh my gosh, you have to meet my friend. You'll love them. Uh, but I think at least the difference this time versus, the dating assumption is whenever someone tells me that, I am genuinely like, yes, please text them, give me their number, let me talk to them. I'm ready. So, yeah.
Like personality aside, we know we're going to have some moments of connection because
Yeah,
of this shared experience.
exactly. Like we need to go get a drink, get a coffee and talk.
Can we go back for a moment to what you mentioned about like navigating the death process, that sort of
Mm.
like bureaucracy after someone dies, and how, well, the world's pretty heteronormative, and I imagine the death care, it's changing or trying to change, but there's just a lot of heteronormativity in there, and I wondered if you could share an example or two of what that looked like for you.
Yeah, it happened more than I wish, obviously. But the earliest example was literally the night Megan died. Of we When we came to the hospital and I was brought in the ambulance along with her, and I am standing outside of the ICU to talk to one of the intake people and start to go through the paperwork process. And I get asked, "Oh, are you the roommate?" And I say, "No, I'm the wife." And then every nurse or doctor that came through after that for a while that were new people was kept asking if I was the roommate. And I kept saying, nope, I'm the wife. And I just don't think that that's the same reaction that I would have gotten if I had been a man and with a woman that came in. So it's like I'm going through truly my personal nightmare, and I'm having to remind people that this is my personal nightmare because this is my wife. And of course, people are apologetic, but yeah, it just like you said, it's some of these heteronormative automatic assumptions that are very hurtful. And then when planning the next day, I again got served this life and that I had no anticipation that I was going to be living. And the next morning, I was realizing I think I need to call a funeral home and to whatever's next. I'm Googling what to do after someone dies, all of this kind of stuff. And I had to stop and worry of, oh, I need to find a cool funeral home because I do not want to be dealing with a single ounce of being treated differently or weirdly or after that hospital experience of being called a roommate so many times. The last thing I want to do is be working with someone who is taking care of my wife in this way. And I am not being treated as her wife, which luckily I'm very thankful. I think I was literally Googling like progressive funeral home New York, stuff like that. And luckily that worked. I found a great funeral home, and the funeral director who I worked with was gay. And I said, okay, great. Then great. I'm not worried about getting hate crimed by the person who is doing death care for my wife. Fantastic. Yeah, just things that others do not have to worry about. That's specific to this niche.
Care for you and also care for Megan, I imagine
Hmm.
too, that this person or this entity is now going to be entrusted with caring for her body of your beloved, and want
Yeah.
that to be someone or someplace that's going to have care for that.
I I will always shout out Sparrow Funeral Home in Greenpoint in Brooklyn. Really wonderful people. And because I'm a young widow, I now find myself saying things like, I've got a great funeral home if you need a recommendation to people, which I've said more times than I ever thought I would.
I know we're going to talk about holidays because we're right now recording. We're just like days away from Christmas, and then New Year's is right after that. And I really want to talk about New Year's. But before we do that, I want to just ask, what do you think Megan would think of how you've been grieving?
Ooh. Oh, that'll get me teary. The thing that has been leading my grief in every choice I make um, is wanting to make her proud. And I think I have. One, because we were such idiots in love, I could be doing this all so badly and she would still be proud of me. But also, she was my number one cheerleader. And she believed in me more than I ever believed in myself. But I also learned a lot from her. I learned how to be strong. I learned how to ask for what I need and what I want and not put up with as much bull from people, from her. The way that I have been able to have any sort of strength in grieving is only because it was a learned trait from her, which I know she also wouldn't agree with me saying that. But that's, she's not here to tell me otherwise. I get to tell her it's all thanks to her. Um, so yeah, I think in the moments where I say something like, I don't know how I'm still doing it, I like can hear her voice being like, of course you are. Like, I knew you could do this. Duh. You're amazing. You can do anything. She always was the person who thought I could do anything in the world. She was in the middle of law school and she would say, you should have been the one in law school. I was like, no, absolutely not. She goes, yeah, you'd be better at this than me anyway. So I like to think she'd be really proud.
Seems like the ways you've learned to care for yourself in grief are directly related to the ways that Megan cared for you.
100%. Because I also know if I didn't take care of myself, she would kick my butt. Like she would not be having it if I was not doing things to take care of myself. So I have her voice often. Like I'll do things when I don't want to do them because I'm like, yeah, yeah, I know, Megan. Like I hear you. She was the one that always, right? We were together during COVID. She was the one that was said, we got to get out. We're going to go for a walk. We got to get fresh air. We need to do this. And I would say, no, I don't want to. And she would say, you're doing it. Come on. And then we get out and I'm like, I love the outdoors. And she would just roll her eyes at me. And um, so she's still my motivator in everything.
I know it's hard to talk about Christmas and New Year's in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I don't know who planned the calendar to have, these major holiday family get-togethers back to back, but I have a
Back
lot
to
of
back.
notes. I have a lot of notes for whoever did this.
This is going to be your third Christmas
hmm
and your third New Year since Megan died. And how is one question, how is this year feeling heading into the season? And second question is really specifically around New Year's, like how that holiday has, I call it kind of like the sneaky grief holiday and how it's been for you.
Yeah. So I think to start how each of these has been different. Megan passed on November 17th in 2023. That year it was the week right before Thanksgiving. And so my firsts of like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year blur. Like I barely count those as firsts really because while I was technically experiencing and moving through them, I was numb and I was took everything to stay awake and it didn't feel like I was really doing those without her. It was just those were days I was doing without her, like every other day. Um, so my second one, in a lot of ways, was so much harder last year. And I think I thought, not that I was in the clear, because I knew this whole, oh, after a year, no, I knew that was no, not a realistic thing. I knew grief was lifelong, but I thought somewhere in my brain, I've done these before. I can do it again. I've proven to myself I can do it. And it got me because I was numb for those first ones. And the second one was the realization that this is now have to how I have to do it for the rest of my life. and it was everything looked a little bit more quote normal, right? We're a little over a year out. So maybe that first year was not, we were not going full out on things because everyone was in a daze. But that second one, it looked a little more normal. And I have a lot of nieces and nephews and they're all on Megan's side. And so, we're doing things fully for, the kids are here. And I went, oh, life happens and we just kind of we keep doing these things, but she is not here and it is so glaring, but things look the same, but they're totally different. And that makes my stomach sick. And this is how it's going to be the rest of my life. So that was really hard. I was in a funk for that whole season last year and a while after rebounding. This year's a little different for me too. I, between last year and this year, had made some life changes. I actually moved out of New York City. I left the apartment where we lived. I bought a house. I moved a little north of the city. So I'm in a new place. And so the holidays are looking a little bit different, truly looking like visually, which I think has been helpful because it's not just the same exact picture, but she's gone. It's a little different and starting to make some kind of new traditions and I wouldn't say new traditions, trying to reconceptualize what these days will look like for me. Um, but it's still really hard. And this was actually the first year I got back into all of our um, decorations and decor. The previous two holiday New Year's, I actually spent back in my parents' house out of state. So I hadn't gotten into all of our Christmas stuff, and Megan was the big Christmas lover in our house. So this year, when I unboxed them, was the first time I had touched them since she died, um, which was really hard and good. Like everything is in grief, you're kind of holding both of these at the same time. So that's Christmas. I just rambled about Christmas stuff, but you also had part of the question about New Year. Can you remind me?
Yeah, just wondering, like, I think a lot of focus ends up being for folks who celebrate Christmas on Christmas. Like, I just
Mm,
got to get through Christmas. And then New Year's comes and it can catch people off guard. Sometimes not the actual holiday, a little bit around the
hmm
actual holiday, but like the after, like when it now is a different
hmm
year. And, we talked about grief being like a learning curve. And I feel like it's another part where the brain has to like recalibrate again. So I wonder if you could just speak to
hmm
that.
Definitely for New Year. For me, New Year's is one of the hardest parts of the year. And that also surprised me the first time. Even that first year where everything was numb, it still felt worse than the others because I remember thinking and feeling I'm leaving her behind. I'm leaving her in 2023. Um, I'm going somewhere that she'll never be. And that broke me so much. And that just continues to happen. I think that first one was the hardest, obviously, because it was the first one she didn't get to come into with me. And it was time is so weird in grief, but it was such a visual, laid out reminder of you are here, she is back here. And as I've gone, now it's just a matter of I look at, oh, it's almost 2026. That's feeling so far from 2023 in a way that I don't love. I do not love. And also knowing that because of how time works, I will continue to only get further away and I'll never get closer, both because I can't go back and she can't come forward, is something that I've had to accept and deal with and cry a lot about. And but the most similar kind of comparison is also birthdays. Birthdays are really hard. I had a really similar reaction to when I this current year turned 30 because that's a decade she never got to get to. And she, 28, she died. And I'm getting further and further away from that age we both were. And I'm entering new phases that she's not in. But yeah, I think that kind of birthday feeling is so similar to that New Year's feeling. And it all revolves around how time passes and how we talk about time, and which is just something that all changed after experiencing grief. I definitely didn't think about it in these ways, and I didn't have to.
Yeah, I think there's something about that accumulation of absence, or that accumulation of goneness, of how could it be like another year that they're not here, and also another year they're not going to experience. And I think that's another piece of grief that we don't always understand until we go through it, of the toggling. Sometimes it's not a toggle back and forth. Sometimes it's a convergence at the same time. But like what me as the person who's grieving is missing, and what the person who has died is missing. And that's it's not a whole other kind of grief, but it's another layer of that grief that I think can really catch people off guard.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many moments of that you get hit in the head with a lot as a young widow too, because we joked in my friend group that we were child brides. We got married 2 days after my 27th birthday, and Megan was 26, which we both grew up in the Midwest. That's not child brides for the Midwest, but living in New York City, we were some of the first ones of our friends to get married. So now that I'm 30, now I'm really hitting the moment where we have more of our peers that are getting engaged, married, and having families. They are buying houses. They are getting those jobs they finally wanted. All of those big celebratory moments that are those moments, like you said, of it's not just I wish they were here, me, but I'm grieving that they are not here. Like Megan is not here experiencing this. And I'm grieving that my friends who are going through this, I'm grieving that they don't get to have her here for those. All tied together with a little grief bow on the top. Yeah, it's the time of life of just those lots of moments of that.
Worst Christmas present ever. Right?
Yeah, terrible.
Terrible. We have notes about that too.
So I've got a laundry list of notes.
Well, speaking of notes, Mackenzie, you and I connected because of your writing, that you've been really public about your grief. So for listeners who are tuning in today and want to know how to connect with you once this conversation is over, how can they find you?
Yeah. I run a little Substack blog that I post my own reflections on, called Good Gay Grief. And so if you want to follow there, I think the URL is just goodgaygrief.substack.com. I also have a public facing Instagram account where I post anything from sharing some stuff about that writing to dark humor grief memes and other such stuff. And that one, the handle is Dead Wife Club. So find me either of those places.
Well, Mackenzie, thank you for sharing about Megan with me and with our listeners, and giving us a little window into the rom-com of your meeting and your relationship and your marriage, and all of the after that has come since she died. I feel really a privilege to connect with you. Although, as we mentioned when we first connected, I sure wish we never met, because then we wouldn't be having this conversation. But yeah, thank you for making time and space to talk with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. And, I joked at the beginning how much I love to talk about grief. But the thing I really love to talk about most is Megan. So thanks for giving me the time and space to do a little bit of both today.
And listeners, I say this each and every time, but thank you so much for being part of our community as we close out 2025 and head into a new year. I am very thankful for each of you who tuned in, who shared episodes with people who you think might be interested in what we are talking about. And for those of you who've reached out to me directly to share what the show means to you, or if you have an idea for a topic or a potential guest for the show. So if you want to connect with me, you can email me at griefoutloud@dougie.org. It's dougy.org. That's our main website. You'll find all of the information about our local grief support programming, our free downloadable resources like tip sheets and activity sheets for kids and teens and young adults, as well as each and every episode of Grief Out Loud. Always excited to share that the podcast is sponsored in part by the Chester Stephan Endowment Fund. Grief Out Loud is a production of Dougy Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.